and I'm with the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. I am the Empower Program Coordinator. And our programs, I don't know if you guys are familiar completely, but the Empower Program is a nonprofit organization as well as Beltline.org or Beltline.org, Beltline Incorporated, and we're sister organizations. So Beltline Incorporated deals with the infrastructure and building our Beltline, and then the Atlanta Beltline Partnership helps with the fundraising through philanthropic dollars of the Beltline, but also with workshops like these, because our mission is to help mitigate the displacement that can sometimes come when you're developing areas or changing areas. So we really focus on empowering those communities. The Beltline runs through 45 different neighborhoods, and so we seek to assist the neighborhoods that need help with doing so. And we tend to have found in our research that it's more of our south and west side of Atlanta. So those are what we call our legacy residents that live there, and we are on a mission to help keep them in those neighborhoods and keep them enjoying the things that made Atlanta great and also make the Beltline a great improvement to the city. So this program, we have Legacy Resident Retention Program, which is a program that does that same thing we're talking about. We help to pay the increase of taxes for our qualified residents so that they will not experience the financial hardships of tax burdens as well. And we're funded right now until 2030, and we'll continue to work to try to extend that for us as well. And then for things like this, we're partnering with wonderful community partners like Grove Park Foundation and Atlanta Legal Aid, who will help us to understand what property taxes are, how they affect us, how to make sure that you're getting all of the exemptions and things that help make your property values or property tax responsibilities where they should be. And then in the case that you find there's something incorrect, that you understand that you have the right the option to appeal that. And this is what tonight's workshop is about what those steps are, what your options are, and then we'll follow up with some assistance for you guys as well. We will have consultation sessions, which I will also make a link available in the chat, but I'll also send out a follow-up email to everyone with the information about how to sign up for a consultation session. Of course, you can visit our website, which will be beltline.org, and you will pick a time and a place that works for you. We have 2 in-person sessions, and we have 1 virtual session. And we have plenty of volunteers who are very excited about helping you guys to navigate through the process of submitting your tax appeals.
And thank you to the Atlanta Beltline Partnership for hosting these. I'm Stacey Reynolds. I'm an attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid. We're basically a nonprofit law firm. We cover the sort of 5 inner counties of Metro Atlanta, which of course includes Fulton County. And we started a project to try and help people deal with their property taxes to avoid losing their homes back when the Fulton County suddenly increased the values very rapidly back in 2017, 2018. And so we actually wanted to put into place ways to help empower people to do this stuff. And so it fit in very nicely with the Empower program through Atlanta Beltline Partnership. My goal is to try and make this at least somewhat less scary, demystify some things, and try and make sure that you know that you can do this on your own. We do have people to help, and so I'm hoping that anyone who's not comfortable can get that help. But for those of you who are comfortable, you really can do this on your own. It's not that scary. So let's jump in. So our objectives today, there's a bunch of different pieces that I'm going to go through, and I'll try and stop periodically for questions just to clarify kind of what we just talked about. But like she said, I'd like to keep the main questions for the end, but I don't want, if I say something and it's not clear what I'm talking about, I do want to, correct that in the moment. So we're going to talk about property taxes and the ways you have control over those property taxes. I know it feels like you don't, but there are some ways that you do. We're going to talk about understanding your notice of assessment, the basics of tax appeal. I have a lot of material about researching values, and I'm going to try not to completely geek out on that. So I'll try not to do a real deep dive, but I do want to at least make you aware of some resources that make it a lot easier to do the research. and also how to find your notice of assessment, because those notices of assessment are coming out very soon. They're going to be put into the mail. So who knows how long it'll take for them to go through the mail. So I want to make sure that y'all understand how you can go about finding it online, because as soon as they are actually in the mail, they will also be available online. And so you'll probably be able to get it online a lot quicker. We're also going to talk about submitting the tax appeals and what to expect after you file an appeal. Now, in all of this, I think the part that's going to be a little bit most overwhelming is the researching value. So I just want to also say up front, the research doesn't have to be done immediately. You can actually put off a lot the deeper research until it's time for your appeal hearing. But if you have the time and the luxury, go ahead and do the research, because that can help you with what you put in your appeal. So let's dive in. The truth about tax bills. So we all know the tax bill. The truth, though, is that the tax bill is just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually a lot of the things that go into making the tax bill. And those are the things that we're going to focus on that you have some control over. So there's the value. That's the value that the assessor says the home is worth. That's going to establish what your taxable value is. Then there's the tax rate, or in tax lingo, it's usually called the millage rate. And then there's the homestead exemption, because that gets subtracted from the taxable value when they're calculating the tax bill. So that all three of these things go into your tax bill, and all three of these things are something that you have some control over. To understand how you have control, you first have to understand how the property taxes are calculated. So the assessor is deciding what the value is. And actually, spoiler alert, they just decided on your house. They're actually sending it out very shortly, and you're going to find out what they say your house is worth. They are just making a guess. Unless you sold your house last year, they're just guessing at what the value of that property is. So let's say that they say the house is worth $100,000. You then get taxed on a percentage of that. That percentage is going to be, for most places, it's going to be 40% of the full market value. So if they assume the house is worth $100,000, then your taxable amount is going to be $40,000. From that, they're going to subtract any exemptions that you're entitled to get. So the example here is using the senior $50,000 exemption for Fulton County. Obviously, they're not going to give you money back, but they'll subtract that amount from the taxable value, and it's going to whatever results from that is going to be multiplied times the millage rate to figure out how much your taxes are. And that's basically one line on your tax bill. It's going to go through and do this for each category of your taxes. Not all categories have the same exemptions. So you want to be sure that you're getting all the exemptions you can to be able to reduce it, but the value is the one that's going to be there throughout. So again, the things you have control over, the millage rate. Now, this is going to be a political process, so you don't have any direct control over this, but your elected officials are going to be deciding what the millage rate should be, what the tax rate should be. And it's going to be the city, the county, and the schools are all going to be sitting down and thinking, what is the tax rate we need to be able to meet our budget? And they're going to be doing that about the same time you're going through the process of appealing it. So again, that's a political process that sets what the millage rates are going to be. The next thing you have control over is the exemptions. You can apply for and get the highest homestead exemptions that you're eligible to get. For your home, no matter what your age or income, for your primary residence, you're entitled to at least some homestead exemption. And that's going to reduce how much you pay, because it's going to be subtracted directly from your taxable value. It is past the time to be able to apply for anything at this point, but if you've applied for an exemption, the notice of assessment should show that exemption. The third thing you have control over is the value. Again, they are guessing at what the value is, and they're sending those notices out right now. And once you get that notice, it's going to tell you what they think the value is. You have the right to challenge that. You can argue for a lower value that will then, if you lower the total value that they think the house is worth, that's going to lower the taxable value, which is going to translate into direct savings on your tax bill. Now, one thing about value is that a lot of times you hear the things about a value cap, floating exemption, freeze, that sort of thing. Those do affect, how much the increase is going to affect your taxes. But I want to try and clear up the vocabulary a little bit without getting too bogged down, because this is where I always get bogged down, and I don't want to. But I want to be sure to sort of explain this and why the value still matters despite this. Okay, so the value cap and the floating exemption are basically the same thing. To me, value cap makes more sense, because basically what it is for the categories that have this value cap or floating exemption, the taxable value is capped. It can't go up more than a small amount each year. For Fulton County, the most that these categories can go up is going to be 3% per year, or the consumer price index amount, which so far has always been less than 3%. But for my example, I'm just going to go with the 3% to end easy math. So let's say the value of the home is $250,000. The assessed value, so 40% of that is going to be $100,000. That's what they are saying that the value is this year. Let's say last year was your base year, that you locked in a value last year, and that value can only go up no more than 3%. So the most that value could go up is 1,500, because 3% of 50,000 is 1,500. So basically the value is capped at 51,500. That's the most that you could be taxed at. From that, they subtract any exemptions, and that's how they figure out the amount that they multiply times the millage rate to get your taxes. Now, the way your bill looks, and I had to do the math to confirm that this is the same thing. What they do is, instead of going with that 51,500 as the assessed value, because that's the capped value, what they're going to do is they're going to show the full assessed value, the full 40%, and then they're going to subtract any exemptions. And because they're treating that cap as an exemption, they're going to take the difference between that cap value and what your full assessed value is, and add that to the exemptions in the exemption column. And so the result is the same thing as the way I think of it with the value cap. So what this does is, even though in this example the value doubled, the actual taxable value really didn't go up that much. So it didn't make that big a difference. And I have no idea why. Sorry, I've got a phone ringing in my ear, and I'm hoping that it's not also ringing for y'all. Okay, so in addition to the value cap and the floating exemption, there's also a freeze. And we'll be talking some about a freeze, because if you do see this property tax appeal through to the end, then you get a freeze for 3 years. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the difference between a floating exemption and a freeze is that the freeze actually freezes it at that value. It doesn't go up to 3%. And so the value is going to be the 50,000 from last year, if last year was the year that you froze. And what that means is that the total taxes that you owe are going to be a little bit smaller than if it had been through the floating exemption. So that's what those terms are. Now, why does it still matter what the value is in a tax appeal? Why do you still need to appeal it? And the reason is that a floating exemption right now does not apply to all your taxes. So, it doesn't apply to all the categories. For example, the City of Atlanta school tax does not have a floating exemption right now. And so what that means is that when that value jumped, doubled this year, that's actually going to be the value that they're going to use for the school taxes. They're not going to be using the capped value. And you want to keep in mind that even if you're getting the highest senior exemptions that exist right now in the city of Atlanta, the most that you're going to have exempted from the school tax is $75,000. So that's what this example is. What that means is that if the value is more than the because the $100,000 value is more than the $75,000 exemption, you do owe school taxes even if you're a senior getting the highest exemptions. As a result, there's going to be a big tax bill. So that's the reason that you still need to worry about the taxes, even though the sorry. Let me do this real quick.
We can't hear any ringing, Stacy.
Okay, I'm gonna just try and quickly do not disturb it. Okay, now I won't hear it anymore because that was really annoying. Sorry. Okay, so the exemptions, the floating exemption right now is an opt-in. And so for this year, it's very clear. The City of Atlanta Schools is not one that participates. There is legislation, and y'all will be voting in November, that will look at making the floating exemptions as an opt-out. So this may change a little bit. The calculus of whether or not to appeal may change a little bit depending on what happens with that. But for now, the value does make a difference, and you want to be aware of that. So what that means is that the two places that you have the most control over being able to keep your tax bill as low as possible is the homestead exemptions and the property tax appeals. And we're going to be focusing on the property tax appeals right now. So let's take a quick brief pause to see if there are any questions about your tax bill and how you can control it, keeping in mind that we still have a lot to cover, and there's, we'll get to a lot of the other things. But if you have any questions about what I just said, now's your chance.
Once we get the 3-year freeze on the appeal, how do we know when that appeal, or will that freeze be over with? Like, is there something that she can refer to on the website, or will she receive some correspondence? How does she keep track of when that freeze ends?
It should be reflected in the notice of assessment. Once you get it, the next 2 notices of assessment should show that it's a tax freeze. But the easiest way is, whatever year you appealed, it's going to be that year and then the 2 years after it. So just, when you're doing the appeal, just go ahead and sort of calculate that, okay, in 3 years, I'm going to need to do this again. Yeah.
And we have a question on the chat. It says, is it correct that you only need to apply for homestead exemption once?
Right. So there is one category in Fulton County for a low-income senior where you have to apply every 2 years, but for everything else, you apply once, you're done. And it just continues. Now, they are going through and auditing and removing some exemptions for people where they think the person that is entitled to get it is deceased or no longer living there or something like that. So, so there are some circumstances where the exemptions get removed. But yeah, once you get the exemption, it continues. You do need to apply, as you age or qualify for any higher exemptions, you need to go back and apply for those. Those are not going to be automatically put in, if you weren't eligible the first time you applied.
Okay, we have another in-person question.
Does the value cap mean taxes can only go up 3% in a given year?
Does the value cap mean that taxes can only go up 3% in a given year?
It's not the taxes, it's the value that is capping. So the millage rate could change, which means that the total amount of your taxes could be more than that. And it only applies to the categories where the floating exemption is a part of it. So like I said, it doesn't apply to Atlanta City school taxes. And so, you know, that could go up as much as your value can jump from year to year. So for the categories where it is there, the most that the value can go up is going to be capped at 3%. With again, most of the years it's been less than that. The consumer price index has actually been less than 3% for most of the years, or I think for every year so far.
Okay, and I have one more in-person question. Okay, after the expiration of the 3-year freeze, is that percent or value cap, will that apply after the freeze is over?
So yeah, that each year, it's still subject to that increase every year. It's just that when your property is frozen, it doesn't reach that increase. So there's no cap that's needed because it's, you know, for the freeze, it's just going to stay and it's not going to go up that 3%. But once you, you know, at the end of that 3 years, they're going to go back and they're going to value the property based on what they think the fair market value is. And at that point, they're going to include, you know, in the cap, there's still going to be that 3% increase for each of those years. So, so let's say, you know, the value was the value cap at 50,000. It can go up 1,500 for each of those 3 years that it was frozen. And then the next year, the value cap is going to be what, 54? I don't know, 54,500. I can't do the math that quickly. But you know, so your cap is still going to go up. It's just that the value won't go up during those frozen years. And because the value hasn't gone up, it's not going to hit that cap. Once your value gets reassessed, you're gonna probably hit that cap, and that'll come into play again. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, say it again. He was saying, what if it's 50,000 but it's frozen? And then after the assessment expires, after the freeze expires, then it goes up to 300,000 or something like that. Should he expect like 10% after, or how does he set an expectation for what that could look like after the freeze?
Yeah, and so that's what I was saying. So let's say that the base value is the 50,000. The most that it can go up each of those 3 years of the freeze is going to be 1,500. So when you get to that 4th year, basically, so 50,000, the 4 years of 3% would be 6,000. So basically in that 4th year, the cap value is going to be 56,000. So if you're, you know, if they assess the value at 300,000 in the example, then you're still going to have that cap, and the rest of, and that difference is going to be part of your floating exemption in the categories where the floating exemption applies. Now, for the category where there's no floating exemption, then you're going to have that entire increase as part of it. So we're focusing on the property tax appeals. Before we get into the notice of assessment piece of it, I want to point out we are almost right here. So this is basically the property tax timeline. We've already passed the January cutoff when ownership is, you know, when they're looking at who's the owner. We've passed the April 1st deadline for applying for the homestead exemption. So if you apply for homestead exemptions now, it's going to go into place next year. What we're at now is that the notices of assessment are about to come out. The county has approved the digest, which means that they have approved the values that the Fulton assessors have set. And they have approved the mailing of the notices, which means that basically the notices are with their mailing vendor and they're coming out anytime now. from the date that they are issued, you're going to have 45 days to appeal. So it's very important that you know what date it's issued, and that timeline is already going to be started once it's issued. And the problem is the date that they're issued is basically the date they're mailed. So by the time you get them, it is going to be a bit later if you wait for the mail. We will talk about how to look for them online so that you can sort of check periodically to see when they first hit and be able to pull them up online. Okay. But, again, you only have this 45-day window. And if you notice on this timeline, after that 45-day window ends, then you get your tax bill. So by the time you get your tax bill, it is too late to appeal. So this is why I really want you to pay attention, look for those notices of assessment, appeal it if the value has gone up, be ready for this. I'm going to talk about the rest of the timeline is about what happens once you've appealed, and I'm going to talk about that a bit more later. So, reading your notice of assessment. This is what the notice of assessment looked like last year. It's going to look basically the same this year. And in fact, this is the way it usually looks. Next year, if the new law goes into effect, then there's going to be some changes to what this looks like. But for now, we're going to focus on understanding what it is you're going to get in the mail in the next couple of weeks. The first thing you want to look at is the date. Again, that's going to be the date that they issued this notice, not the date that you received it. And they're going to give you the appeal deadline date. So they're going to give you that 45-day deadline. So you want to be sure that you know what that is and are ready for it. It's going to show the homestead exemption. It's going to say that, whether or not you're getting the homestead exemption. If it says yes, then it means that you're getting some exemption. If it says no, you're getting no exemptions. If it says yes, HF01, then you're getting a basic exemption. So if you applied for higher exemptions this year and it hasn't been approved, then this is your chance to appeal it. If you applied for an exemption and didn't get it, if you had a denial, you may want to go ahead and appeal that denial notice, or you can, if you haven't gotten a decision yet, you can go ahead and appeal this. And then if it turns out that they're just processing the homestead exemption, you can withdraw your appeal. It's no big deal. The big thing, and the whole reason for this thing being issued is the values. It shows you what last year's value was, and then it also will show you the proposed value for this year. If there's a big increase, you want to think about appealing that. And again, it may affect your tax bill now, or it could affect it in a few years. But if there's a big jump, you want to think about if it's worth it appealing it. To help you figure out if it's worth appealing it, they also give you an estimated tax bill. Now, this is not your tax bill. This is just an estimate of what the taxes would be using last year's millage rates and the new value. And so that they're trying to give you something where you could compare that to last year's tax bill to see kind of how much that floating exemption has helped you avoid the big increase. If there isn't a big difference between this estimated tax and your last year's tax bill, you can wait. Does that mean that it's not really worth appealing? It may not be. Now, it may be worth appealing just to make sure that you get that freeze, because again, it is a 3-year freeze. That's the year that you appeal plus the 2 years after. And right now, that's going to go into play no matter what. Even if you lose at the Board of Equalization hearing, you can still get that freeze. Next year, if the new law goes into place, you'll only get that freeze if you succeed in lowering the value. So right now, there's no danger to it. You can automatically get that freeze. So, kind of if you lose, you still win. So it may still be worth doing. Basically looking at this is going to be when you're thinking through yourself, maybe I should appeal this. So a couple other important things that are on here. It gives a parcel ID number, and you're going to need that for your appeal. It also gives a neighborhood code number. When we're talking about comparing your home to other homes that are similar, they want you to do it within your neighborhood. And what you and I think of as our neighborhood is not necessarily the same as what they think of as your neighborhood. So, so ideally you want to look at and make sure that you're looking at properties that are in that same neighborhood code. So those are also on here. Again, this notice of assessment is coming soon to your mailbox. Who knows how long it will take? My husband actually just got a bill that he had paid, and he called to say, you know, why am I getting this bill? And then when he looked closer, he discovered it was because they had mailed it 2 months ago. So, you know, even though he had paid it a month ago, he just got it, and it was very confusing. If they wait 2 months for you to get your bill, and it's only a 45-day window, that's going to be a problem. So what I want you to do, if you have any way of looking online, or if you know someone who can help you with looking online, I want you to be able to look it up online. And you're going to be able to do that with fultonassessor.org. I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later. It's actually very simple, but you know, we know that they're going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So just every couple of days, just go in and check and see if it's come out yet. You may also see things on the news about it. So, you know, you can go in and once you see that. But this is a way for you to be able to see your notice before it actually comes in the mail. Okay. Are there any questions about the notice of assessment? Okay, so I'm going to move on to tax appeals. So let's do a quick overview of what tax appeals are for. This is your chance to argue for a lower value to lower the taxable value. It's also your chance to show that you're eligible for homestead exemptions that you were denied. You have to have applied this year to be able to appeal it, but this is your chance to challenge it if they've denied you an exemption that you should have gotten. It's also a chance for you to get that lower value. You do have to appeal within 45 days of when the notice of assessment is made available. Again, that changes every year. We don't know exactly what the date is this year because we're doing this a little bit early, but it's going to be in the next couple of weeks. And as soon as they're made available, boom, you're going to have 45 days. The value freeze for 3 years happens as long as you see the hearing, see the appeal through to the end. Ideally, you know, if for a Board of Equalization hearing, you're going to need to show up for that Board of Equalization hearing, or you can reach an agreement with the appraiser about what the value is and make sure you're agreeing to that 3-year freeze. So if you go to the Board of Equalization, okay, now I'm going to off my camera because I'm getting some wonkiness with my internet. So with the 3-year freeze, you do have to see it through to the Board of Equalization. A lot of people are afraid of the Board of Equalization hearing. It's not scary, really. It sounds very intimidating, but it's not. The Board of Equalization is just 3 individuals who are taxpayers just like you, who have been selected to actually hear these cases. They're given a little bit of training, but for the most part, they have the same concerns that you do. And so as long as you go in and try and explain to them why you think that the value should be lower, they're going to listen to it in the same way that you would. And the Board of Equalization is not allowed to go any higher than the value that's in your notice of assessment. So it's not like you're going to get a higher value by appealing it. The only exception to that is if you are in a freeze, but if you appealed like last year or the year before and you appeal again, then they could look at a higher value. So, there are a couple of exceptions to that cap on the value, but for the most part, as long as you take it to the Board of Equalization, the highest it's going to go is that notice of assessment value. So there's not really a big risk. You do need to be sure that when you do the Board of Equalization hearing that you present some evidence to show why the home should be at a lower value compared to other homes in the neighborhood. As long as you're giving some sort of, hook for them to hang their hat on, a lot of times the Board of Equalization will at least bring it down a little bit. So, just be sure that you do bring some evidence to show what it is that that supports that lower value. Now, a lot of people are more visual learners, and so this, I saw this on Facebook. I'm sorry, I don't know what the correct attribution for it is, but to me, it explains really what you're doing in a tax appeal hearing. What you're trying to do is present evidence to show that the house is, the modest home that you know it to be, and not the grand palace that the tax assessor's office thinks it is. So whatever evidence that you can think of that would support the true picture of what your house is, as opposed to the fancy one that they think it is. That's really what you're trying to do in a tax appeal. There are 3 grounds for appeals. There's uniformity, and uniformity is basically sort of a fairness argument. The county is supposed to be uniform in how they're assessing taxes. And so they need to be uniform in how they are valuing properties. So properties that are similar should have similar values. If your property is being valued at a higher amount than other similar properties, then there's an argument that that's not uniform, and you should be able to get it lower, because it should be brought into uniformity with those other properties. The second ground for appeal is value, and there are actually kind of 2 pieces to that. The value could be because the condition of your home suggests that it should be a lower value. They don't have the correct information about your home, or the information about your home, what it looks like inside is very different than what they might have seen in their reviewing it from the outside. So that can affect what the value is. That would be a value appeal. Also, if there are sales in the area that would suggest that your home should be a lower value, that your house wouldn't have sold for as much as they say the house is worth, then that's also a value appeal. Now, keep in mind that sales, they're going to be looking at the value, the sales that happened in 2023, because they're kind of setting the value as of January 1st. So any recent sales are not necessarily going to count in it. That's going to go into what the value should be for next year. The third ground for appeal is the exemption denied ground for appeal. Again, if you applied for an exemption and you were denied and you should have gotten it, then you need to appeal it. We're not going to go into much about that, because what we're focusing on today is going to be the value and uniformity type appeals. So I want to make sure that all 3 of these are things that you grounds for you to appeal. Okay, so before I move into what and where to search, are there any questions about the concept of tax appeals?
Okay, we have a question.
Okay. I'm sorry?
She's saying, what if you appeal and your deadline, and your Board of Equalization hearing is after the deadline to pay your taxes?
We're actually going to get to that a little bit later. There's a temporary tax bill that gets sent out, and you'll have to pay it. Basically, nobody's appeal is going to be done before the tax bill is due. So this is a section where we start talking about where do you look for the notice of assessment, and how do you go about researching the values. So here's an overview of research. You start with your home. And the first thing you're going to do with your home is look and see, is the information that they have about your home accurate? If it is, great. If it's not, then that could be a value appeal. That could be something that you could challenge. If the truth of your home actually would speak to a lower value. If the truth of your home would speak to a higher value, you may not want to bring that up. The other thing that, in starting with your home, is that it allows you to gather the information about your home that will then help you be able to figure out what other homes would be similar to yours. So, because you want to be looking at comparable properties, you want to look at similar properties that are similar in terms of like age and condition, quality of home. Basically, you want it to be a somewhat similar home. you want to consider the grounds for appeal while you're researching. So we just talked about what the grounds for appeal is, but when you're actually doing the research, it comes into play. Because if you're looking at a uniformity argument, you're going to be looking at the 2024 values. You're going to be looking at what did the assessor say my house was worth in 2024 and comparing that to what other houses were worth in 2024, what they said those houses were worth. So that way you're looking at what the assessors really said about the values this year. The value appeals, those are going to be based on either your condition, which is fine, or it's going to be based on sales. And the sales that they're going to be looking at again are last year's sales. You're going to look at 2023 sales for a value appeal. So when you're looking at the tax assessor's information, they have information about sales, but you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at just the 2023 sales, not the ones from this year or from even the year before. You also can start thinking about what other evidence is there. So what we're going to be looking at is what information can you get just from the tax assessor's website, but it may make you think of things that you might want to start looking for bolstering your argument or looking for other ways to argue that your value should be lower. So be thinking about those things while you're going through the research. When you're reviewing the information about your home, you want to be thinking about like the square footage, the age of the home, quality of construction, condition, desirability, utility. That's what they call the CDU. That's basically the condition of your home. If there are accessory buildings that they have listed that have been torn down, if there's an HVAC system that's missing that they've got it showing, they've got the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, finished basement, that sort of thing. If any of that information is wrong, then you want to think about a value appeal. So you want to think about whether it's accurate, and then also, again, gather the information so that you can compare it to other homes. What is similar? So this is, if you're in a neighborhood where all the homes are basically the same, then it's easy to show what's similar. If they're the same, they're the same. You can compare your home to those homes, any day of the week and have no problem. But if you happen to be in a neighborhood where the homes are not all the same, it's going to be a lot harder. There's no way to argue that, the small shotgun house is the same as the McMansion that's been built next door. Those just are not going to be equal. But you might be able to at least get as much of the similarities as you can. If those are the comparable properties that you have, then the way to try and make them as similar as you can is to look at them in terms of the price per square foot. So, if the McMansion sold for some amount of money, you divide that sale price by the square footage to determine how much did they pay per square foot. And then say, okay, let's say the market rate then is to pay this much per square foot. If they were buying my house, then if I multiply that per square foot by the square footage of my house, this is what they would get. And it might be lower than what the assessor thinks your home is worth. So the way you start is you go to the fultonassessor.org website, and you're going to start out by searching for your home. There are two search engines that they use. One is the enhanced property search, and one is the basic property search. I'm not sure if they're going to keep the basic property search for much longer, and the enhanced property search is generally easier. So I'm really going to focus on the enhanced property search, and I'll touch on the basic property search just for a couple of things right at the end. Once you click on the enhanced property search, it's going to take you to a search screen where you're going to be able to search for your property using the owner name, location, address, or parcel number. This search system actually, it tries to help you find it, so it's a lot easier than the basic property search version. So you pull up your property, and then you're going to just scroll down. It's going to be like a long page of all the stuff about your property, and you just want to scroll down and check to see, is this information correct? Do they have all the, the size of my lot, the values? Is all the stuff correct? Start looking at, this is the information that I'm going to need to then compare to other homes when I'm starting to do this. And a very important piece of this is if you keep scrolling down on the same page, you're going to see where it says assessment notices. This is where you're going to go. Right now, all it shows is the 2023 assessment notice. Soon it's going to have a 2024 one. And as soon as it shows that 2024 one, you're going to want to click that button. It's going to download the new assessment notice, and you're going to be able to look at what they say about your property as far as the value, the homestead exemption, and all of that. And it's going to show you, the deadline for appealing. Now, so once you've looked at all the information about your property, the next step is to compare it to other properties. And the enhanced property search makes it so much easier. Basically, they've created a button. I mean, I'm serious, just a button. You press that and boom, it's going to give you a search screen that's going to already have your information in it. It's going to make it so much easier. And it's going to be sort of defaulted to the idea of doing a search for any sales in your neighborhood code. The one thing I do want to point out is that their default actually goes to 1 year. And again, if you did it 1 year from today, that's not going to give you all of 2023. It's going to give you some that's in 2024. So what you want to do is the only thing you need to do is change just that sales research timeframe. Now, I used last year's screen. So when you do that, what you want to do is you want to put in January 1st, 2023 and to December 31st, 2023, so that you're getting the entire year of 2023 sales. Once you do that, then you click on the search button and it's going to come up with a list right there. It's going to have your property at the top, and then it's going to have all these other properties that sold in your neighborhood code. You can actually go through this list by clicking on the blue pins to look at the different properties, see which ones compare favorably with yours. Once you pick about 5, you can actually have the system generate a comparable properties report, and then you'll have something that you can download and save and then take it with you when you actually go to the hearing. It's just an amazing system. I personally like to do it instead of using what they actually have just on the screen here. I go down to the bottom and I download the list into Excel so that I can then come up with a list. It's kind of an overwhelming list. I admit that. But the very first one is going to be your property. So I highlight that, and then I can sort, and, I can look at just the columns that I need to look at. They have a price per finished square foot. That's basically the sales price per square foot. They have a value per square foot, and that's going to be the appraised value per square foot. And you can sort by those 2 columns and only look at the stuff that's, less than what your price per square foot is for your property. And, so you can kind of automatically, kind of reduce the number of properties that you have to look at. And then you can sort of eyeball it by different categories, different columns, like the square footage, the number of bathrooms, the year built, the quality of the home. All of those things can go into, which ones you want to go back and look at. And to go back and look at them, you can use the parcel ID number, the pin on the far left, to look up those properties. And then once you've picked the ones that you want to use, you can go back and create your exhibit. It's just an amazing thing. If there are not very many sales in your neighborhood, you may still want to go back and do another search for uniformity. And to do that, what you're going to do is deselect the sale date entirely. So you don't want them to be searching by sale date. Once you do that, hit the search button. It's going to come up with a list. It's going to be a much bigger list. But again, you can sort it and play with it. It's amazing the amount of just free information they have there. And this is the information that they're using. So you can actually kind of use their evidence against them. So it's wonderful. Again, hit search and go. On the fultonassessor.org website, again, there is a basic property search. It also has a way to search, to find the properties. It also includes an advanced search, which will do a lot of what the special button does on the enhanced search, but it makes it a lot harder. So it's not the greatest thing to do, but it is an alternative if you need it. The one thing that it does do better than the other one is that it has the property card. So if you want to see more information about your property, you can actually look up your property in that search and then pull up where it says residential PRC, that's the property card, and click go, and you can download it that way. It does take a minute, but you can do it. Both of the systems also have maps where you can actually just click around on the maps to see what you find. This can really be a great way to do the uniformity, because you can kind of just, you know what properties in your neighborhood actually look kind of like yours. And so you can sort of click around and see what the values are. And who knows, you may find that Easter egg, that one property that is just so much lower than all the others. And it's not because of the appeal, but it just is somehow magically lower. That's going to be with the comp you want to use for a uniformity argument. Okay. So that's all the sort of free information that you can get on the assessor's website. There's additional appeal evidence, recent appraisals. You can bring photographs, pictures of any of the condition problems are great evidence for showing that the value should be lower because it has these condition problems. Repair estimates, because if you were to sell the house, anyone buying it would subtract how much they have to pay to repair whatever the problem is. Google Street View or internet searches can come up with other evidence that can help with the appeal. Just basically anything that can create that story of why the value should be lower than what they say it is. That's all good evidence. The Board of Equalization does not have rules of evidence, so you're not going to have to worry about whether it's admissible, all the fancy stuff that you see on TV. So whatever evidence you have, bring it with you and make the argument for why it should be lower. Okay, some words of caution when you're doing the research. Frozen values, if somebody appealed last year or the year before, then the value that they're showing for 2024 should be the frozen value, which means that it's not technically a 2024 value. So it's not going to be a good comp for uniformity. Avoid uninhabitable properties unless your property is also uninhabitable, because, basically when you're looking at condition, if it's a 1 or 2 grades below what yours is, you're probably okay. But once you get down to where it's just not even safe to be in it, if you're still living in your home, it's probably not going to be something that's going to be a good argument. You should try to use the valid or qualified sales if you can, but if the only ones that really are supporting a lower value are ones that are not qualified, look at the reason. And if the reason is something that it doesn't sound like it should have been marked as qualified, or as unqualified, just be ready to justify why you think that value, that sale was valid and should be used as a comp. Affordability is not grounds for lowering the value. So, the argument that I can't afford my taxes is never going to win. It's very sympathetic, but you need to give some sort of evidence to show why the value should be lower. And by doing that, you will then hopefully make the taxes more affordable. Okay, we're running really short on time. So rather than stopping and getting questions on this, which I'm sure there are questions now, let me run through real quick about submitting the appeal. The deadline is going to be 45 days from when the assessment's made available. So that's going to be coming up soon. You need to file the appeal either online. If you do that, you want to save the confirmation page. You can file it by mail, but you want to be sure that you mail it in a way that you can prove the date it was mailed was on or before the deadline and that they received it. You also you also can appeal in person. You can take a appeal form down to the any of the tax offices, any of the annexes, and hand it in person. Again, it's a good idea to get proof that you did that, a file stamp copy or something. Appealing online versus paper appeal. I like doing the online because you get proof and it's instant. You immediately see that you have filed your appeal and you get the confirmation. With a paper appeal, unless you do it in person and get a file stamp copy, you don't have that instant, comfort that you actually did file it and that it's met the deadline and all of that. But appealing online does require that you have a an email address to be able to go through the online system. And some people just are not going to be comfortable with doing that. So that's fine. When you're doing whether you're doing online or paper, the basic information is going to be the same. You're going to need to have, the name, the address, the contact information, property ID number. You're going to need to mark which grounds for appeal, the value, uniformity, exemption denied. You're going to need to give an owner's opinion of value. So this is where, if you're able to do the research, it can help you figure out what that value should be. If you don't have time to do the research, you can just guess. You're not locked into this value. You can argue something different on down the line. You can say, listen, as I've looked at this closer, I think that my value should have been higher or lower than what I said. But you want to try and put in a value, and you want to go on the low end, because if they don't process it within 180 days, or go through the process that they need to do at that point, then you could end up getting this value as your resulting value. So you want to err on the low side. And then if you need to increase it later, that's fine. You also need to be sure to sign it. You want to ask for a BOE hearing. That's going to be the type of appeal that's going to be available for all residential properties. And it's going to be free. And it's just not as scary. To find it, you can go to fultonassessor.org, to the appeals, property appeals. You can go through the online process for appeal. That link is going to take you to the online process for filing your appeal. Or you can you can find the PDF of the appeals form. If you're going through the online process, again, if you've used the smart file system before, you can log into it. If you haven't, then it's very easy to set up an account. And if you're getting help from us, at the consultations, the volunteers are going to be able to help you with setting up the account. Or if you have it already set up beforehand, they're going to help with getting you logged in to be able to go through and do this. But you do have to have an email address that can confirm that they mean to set this up. I am going to jump through. This is sort of walking through an online appeal, and I'm going to just sort of skip over this. I will say, again, the online appeal is going to have the same questions, but if you're going to be appealing different things, so like if you're appealing the homestead exemption and value, you may have to submit two different applications. What you'll do is you'll go through, do one appeal using one ground for appeal. After you hit submit, then you're going to go back and start again. You're going to start over on a new appeal and go through the process again, because I want to have the separate ones. You can put in an explanation and add attachments. You do not have to. You can also, if you're going through the online appeal, if you want to, you can come back later, but just be sure that you do it before the deadline. And it's not necessary to put in any documents if you don't want to. Be sure to hit submit when it's time to submit it. It's going to ask, are you sure about that? And you definitely want to say yes, because if you're ready to submit it, and especially if you're close to that deadline, you want to get that submitted. Once you get actually submitted, it's going to come up with a confirmation page. If you do not get to this confirmation page, you have not submitted your application, your appeal online. So you want to be sure you get to this. Woohoo! You've actually succeeded. And you can also confirm it by going to your message center. It should have a message, and by going to your My Filings. My Filings will allow you to actually go back and look at your appeal again. So you can pull it up at any time. So you should keep a copy of it, but this will allow you to go back and look at it as well. Okay, so that's basically the whole appeal process. Or what you need to get ready for filing the appeal. The rest of it is sort of what happens after you submit it. As I mentioned earlier, after you submit your your appeal, then your tax bill is going to come out. It's going to be a temporary tax bill for anyone who's appealed. It's going to be based on either 85% of the assessment value or last year's value, unless you have marked that you want it to be 100%. So you do need to pay that. And then what's going to happen is at the end, once there's a final value, then there's going to be a final bill. If the value ends up being higher than what was used in the temporary tax bill, you are going to have to pay some more in taxes. So you want to save. Be sure to save to be ready to pay whatever that final tax bill is. If it turns out that the final value is less than what that temporary tax bill was, then they'll give you a refund. But usually it's going to be more than what last year's value is, which is usually what your temporary tax bill is going to be. So usually you're going to know a little bit more. The first step is the county is going to have a chance to look at your appeal and decide if they want to agree with it or not. If they decide that they want to go with a different value, either the value you asserted or even a third value, they'll send you another notice. It looks like the notice of assessment. You only have 30 days to appeal that, and you have to appeal it in writing. If they decide they're going to stick with the value that they have, then they're going to send you a no change notice, and that's going to sort of automatically send it on over to the Board of Equalization. Then you'll get a notice from the Board of Equalization, which is going to come from the Superior Court rather than from the tax assessor, and that's going to set when your hearing is. That could be next year. They're still finishing out the appeals hearings from last year, so don't be too surprised that this goes on for a very long time. After the Board of Equalization hearing, you do have the right to appeal to Superior Court. But you have to do that again in writing within 30 days. And that has to be, well, at that point, it becomes a lot more formal. So that's an example of the 180 day. Then I've got some sample notices so that you can see, what a no change letter looks like. The notice to change does look very much like a notice of assessment. The letter setting what your appeal hearing date is. If once you get to the Board of Equalization hearing, there are things that you can do to try and get information or try and settle with the other side. And then again, the outcome is frozen for 3 years, starting with the tax year that was appealed. So, even if you lose at the Board of Equalization hearing, you sort of win. They'll give you the notice. You have the right to appeal. So a recap. This is your chance to argue to reduce the value, which then reduces the taxable value. You need to present evidence that shows that you should be able to get a lower value. The BOE is not scary. 3-year freeze means that you kind of win even if you lose. And don't forget that deadline. I don't know what it is yet, but it's going to be, not that far off. So that's what I have. So now let's open it up for questions. Sorry.
Choice between the 85% or the 100%. She chose 85. But the bill was sent to her loan servicer. And the loan servicer didn't pay it. So she got a late fee on her appeal. She got a late fee that she had to fight. So how could she avoid that in the future? Should she choose that option, or for anybody else who might choose that option?
Well, so what the loan servicer should be paying is whatever bill they get. And so, whatever the tax assessor sent, they should have paid it. If they didn't pay it, that's on them. You need to challenge that with your loan servicer. Now, what sometimes happens is they pay the temporary tax bill, but they don't know that there's going to be this second final bill that comes out. And that final bill may or may not actually go to the servicer. So when you get that final bill, if you have a mortgage company, you need to either pay it yourself and just sort of chalk it up to it'll be sorted out later, or you need to notify your mortgage company to pay that final bill. They'll pay it from your escrow account, and then they'll recalculate your escrow account once it's time to reevaluate it.
She wanted to confirm, did you say that you can go to the Board of Equalization and use their appraiser, or can you hire your own individual appraiser to determine the value of your home?
So the
On appraiser, do you have to go to the Board of Equalization?
So the appraiser that appears at the Board of Equalization is going to be the appraiser that's an employee of the county. They're going to be the ones presenting with, why the county's value is right. You can get your own appraiser. You can get a broker's price opinion. You can get, whatever expert you want, but you don't have to. And you can sort of wait and do that when you appeal to Superior Court if you decide to do that. But basically what you want is just some evidence to sort of show that, yeah, the appraiser is picking these comps to show a higher value, but I have these comps that show that really a lower value is better. And then the Board of Equalization is going to have to evaluate which one they think is better.
It says, can they possibly increase the value in taxes on your appeal if homes have sold for more?
Again, unless you fall into one of those very small categories of exceptions, they're going to be restricted to no more than what the assessed value was. So whatever was in your notice of assessment is going to be the highest they can possibly go, unless you're appealing after having already appealed. So, if you're appealing from a frozen value, then they're going to say, well, wait, this value isn't really your 2024 value. This was really, based on the appeal from last year, the year before. So we can go up from that. Or if you bought the house last year for a lot more, they may be able to go up to that sale price instead of the notice of assessment value. So, but, unless you're kind of in one of those situations, they're bound by that notice of assessment value, even if they discover that the value should be a lot higher.
Part I think we did not particularly cover, but it's that how far outside of your neighborhood can you look for comps, and is there a specified radius?
Yeah. So the notice of assessment is going to have a neighborhood code. Also, if you look up your property in the FultonAssessor.org website, it's going to show a property neighborhood code, and that code is going to be what they're going to look at as homes that are similar to yours. That code may or may not be the neighborhood that you think of. So there's no real specific radius that is used. In fact, there are some neighborhood codes that coexist with other neighborhood codes within the same neighborhood. It's very confusing. But, with the enhanced search, they make it easier because they automatically have the neighborhood code in there. And so it makes it easier for them to be looking just for other properties that are in that same neighborhood code. If you think that there's something that should be in the same neighborhood code as yours and it's in a different one, you can make the argument that this is still in my neighborhood. This is close. This is, much more closely aligned with what my house is than what these are. But for the most part, you're going to want to stick to that neighborhood code.
Okay. And then, so we are over time, but I do want to thank everybody again for joining us online. Thank you for joining us in person. Again, we're going to send out a survey virtually, and we have surveys here. If you would like to enter into our raffle, where we'll be raffling gift cards for your opinions, we would like you to give as much information as possible. Let us know if this is helpful to you. There are other workshops that we can create for you. And so if you'd like to be in that incentive, please include your email on the back, and I will put you in the pool for us to be able to raffle that card. So appreciate you for giving us your information and your opinions. And lastly, everyone has registered. You came on Zoom, so I have your email, and there will be a follow-up recap. And also, if you came in person, please make sure to fill out the sign-in sheet so I can send that recap to you as well. And we will also send the registrations for you guys to get one-on-one consultation help with us. So thank you again. Thank you for Stacy. Thank you for Grove Park, Atlanta Legal Aid. We appreciate you guys, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Stacy.
You're welcome.
1 second. Stacy, if you want to hang out, you can definitely that, and then I'll turn on the video, I think, so you can see us here. Let's see.
Happy to do it.
All right, 1 second. I want to put this. All right. Can you see me? Okay. All right. Hi. You can come here and talk to Stacey.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi.
It might be easier to do that, and I don't have to
Hi there.
translate anymore.
I just got a quick question. So I own a property in Fulton County and in Cobb County. So I guess my question is, are the rules the same for both counties as they are for?
The rules are basically the same. The timing is different. I believe, I want to say Cobb has already come out with their notices. So I don't know what that deadline is, but you have to worry about that. And, you know, where you go to look for information may be different.
Okay.
So I apologize. Somebody else had said that to wait to do any sort of enhancements. I don't say that. What I say is that because really, if you're doing significant enhancements on the property later, then that could end the freeze. You know, if you have significant improvements to the property, that's going to change the overall value of the property more than so that it may knock off the freeze. If you're looking at an appeal, if you do have any sort of problems inside, be sure to take a picture of it before you fix it. You know. So that you have the proof that these problems did exist and they affected the value of your property.
I'm trying to love it. You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful. I did have a question. In 2022, I did appeal my property taxes. What the challenge was for me was understanding the information that the county provided. And basically all they do is go in, click that button with your neighborhood code, and they just do the sales. And that's what they base your value on. It's nothing but the sales. So,
well, they also do, they click a button for uniformity, but the uniformity is still going to be derived from the sales in your neighborhood. So yeah.
Yeah, but when I requested the information that they were going to present at the meeting to see what it was that they would be basing it on, that's exactly what they sent me. The same report that's in the system for the sales value. I had a difficulty challenging that, and I think that's where in my individual consultation that I need more to be able to challenge that more, information to challenge that more.
Yeah, because
it was worth the 3-year freeze, definitely.
Yeah, because that's actually, that's why I want to show you how to do the research, because you doing your own research is going to be key to being able to counter what they provide. Because you're right, they're going to pull out the comps that are most helpful to them. You're going to pull out the comps that are most helpful to you. And then you'll fight over it, and the Board of Equalization will have to decide which one is the correct one.
And I also noticed that they never change the CDU or the condition of the house. It stays the same for ever.
Right.
So,
it's excellent. And even though it's been, 50 years since it was updated. Right.
But this is my last comment though. Even though it's challenging, I know in my second year, the millage rate went down. So therefore my taxes went down, so it's worth appealing it.
Yeah.
I have a question about what's listed as the number of bedrooms in square footage. And I've noticed that the information is incorrect. The amount of square footage as well as the number of bedrooms and bathroom. It's off by one of each, making my house appear bigger than what it is.
Appeal that.
Is it retroactive?
It is not going to be retroactive. It's just going to do it for this year, and then going forward, you would have to have raised it earlier.
It used to be correct. So somehow someone went in and made a change.
So I would start with appeal it, and then also I would contact the appraiser that does your neighborhood to say, listen, I don't know when this changed, but this should never have changed. So they may need to do a field check to come and confirm the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. But, assuming that you don't have the extra one that they say, then that should automatically end up reducing the value.
Okay, one last question. I live in a neighborhood that had a lot of predatory lending, and for some time it's leveling out a little bit. Many of the homes were sold at much higher than the actual appraised value, and so if the city or the county is using those sales to assess our taxes, they're really not accurate based on the value of the home. So how do you deal with that? Because what I remember is inquiring, how does that happen? And it's because investors are coming in, they know the homes are worth a little bit more than they were really lowly. And so it really inflated the price on the sales. And of course, that's where the predatory lending comes in.
Yeah, and that's where something being tagged as qualified or unqualified makes a huge difference. For a long time, what was happening is that they were tagging what they called wholesalers as unqualified because they were artificially low. Now we're seeing that people are buying at artificially high. And honestly, I don't know if they're going to be tagging those as also unqualified or not. But that's where, when you look at the sales, you can also look at the unqualified ones to see if, really this should have been different.
So how do we know whether something's qualified, unqualified, and how do we bring that up in the conversation with the appeals?
When you look at when you start looking at the comps individually, you're going to go in and look at the sales information. The information about that property is going to have recent sales. And you can, and when it shows that recent sale, it's going to show qualified or unqualified or verified or unverified, depending on which system you're looking at. And it's going to give a very, very broad reason. And it's going to be really hard to figure out what that reason is. But especially if you're looking at all the sales in your neighborhood and all of them seem like they're skewed, or if they're really cherry picking what the value, which ones are qualified and which ones are not, that may be an argument. But that's an argument that, well, these are not true reflections of what the value of my neighborhood should be.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have a question. I'm challenged in my neighborhood because the houses that are comparable to mine as far as square footage and number of bedrooms are the newer houses that are going for a lot, and I just am not sure what to compare my house to because my house is older. I don't have all the bells and whistles inside, so I'm not really sure what my choice is because all the houses are huge.
And that's becoming a problem in a number of neighborhoods. I would start with doing the search using the enhanced search to look at other properties in your neighborhood code. Your neighborhood may be one of those that has overlays of different neighborhood codes. So for example, I know Old Fourth Ward is one where they, even though these houses are on the same block, they may be on different neighborhood codes because they've tried to lump similar properties. So they tried to sort of pick out the ones that had been there, like the old bungalows that had been there for decades. Those would be one neighborhood code. The triplexes that were built in the earlier 2000s, those would be a different neighborhood code. And then the sort of McMansion that comes in, that would be a third neighborhood code. And so if you do the search just using their neighborhood codes, see what they have. If it looks like it's still not going to be comparable, then, pick something that looks a lot nicer and say, you know, listen, my house is nowhere, or, you know, we'll look at some things that were valued somewhere around yours and say, wait, my house is not that nice. Like, you know, my house is not nearly in the same category as this. It should be a lower value. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Hi, one more question. So mine is kind of opposite of hers. So one of my properties is a little bit newer than some of the houses that are in that area. So what can I compare it to, and do I really have a leg to stand on because it's a newer house and the other houses are?
I mean, you know, in theory, a newer house should be valued higher. You know, it should be a higher quality, you know, or, you know, a higher condition. So, you know, it should, in theory, be a little bit higher than some of the houses that haven't been fixed up, haven't been, you know, had anything done to them in a while. Again, yeah, but if you can't find anything that's of a similar time frame, try looking at other ones that are of a similar quality and see if you can compare it that way.
Is there a maximum radius that I should go?
Again, I would stick with the neighborhood code that they have. There's not like a per se radius that's involved in that, but it's they try and lump the things in that would fall into the same kind of category and neighborhood.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Neighborhood code, could that be considered zip code? I'm concerned about 30310, 14, and 18. They're the ones that was kind of fluid. And does that have validity?
No, the neighborhood code is completely different than the zip code. Again, basically the neighborhood code is just going to be like a 4 or 5 digit code that the county has divided the neighborhoods into, and they've just sort of determined what your house would fall into. So if you do a search using the enhanced property search, it's going to sort of automatically look in your neighborhood code. And that may actually span into different zip codes.